Hey, we are live.
All right, good afternoon and welcome to the House Committee on the Environment. This afternoon, we are taking up H230, an act relating to the management of fish and wildlife. In particular, section 6, we have two alternatives to consider for this section. And our legislative council is with us to walk us through both of them. Michael, before you begin, would you opine on whether there is are these both trying to do the same thing or do they do different things?
They're similar, but they're not the same. The first version just gives the commissioner a directive to adopt rules related to the taking of reptiles and amphibians, including a mandatory directive to prohibit the intentional taking of reptiles and amphibians except for authorized takings. The second alternative, it is prohibited to take a reptile or amphibian unless under rules adopted by the secretary or the commissioner. The taking is allowed because this species is an S5 species. So that's really one of the key distinction is alternative 2, it is prohibited unless alternative 1, the secretary shall prohibit under rules. So until the rules are adopted, there is no prohibition. But under alternative 2, there is a prohibition unless.
Okay. And Hannah Smith yesterday reiterated their primary interest in the bill, actually. Do you remember what she said?
They're really looking to regulate the commercial import and possession of animals, both coming from out of state and those that are collected here and for commercial sale or distribution. They already have authority in section 7, you can see of S230, where a person should not bring into transport within or possess in the state any live, wild bird or animal. And they're adding including reptiles or amphibians without authorization from the commissioner. What I think the section 6 was originally intended to do was to formalize a process by which they could allow for import for commercial use.
Oh,
Allow for certain things to come in and prohibit other things. For instance, they want to have a prohibited list. And I thought they had a red light, green light list, but apparently that is no longer a thing.
what could come in and what couldn't?
Yeah. But then you started having the conversation about the taking of reptiles and amphibians and what limitations, if any, there were on that practice. And there is no limitation currently unless the animal is threatened or endangered, which led to moving away from the department's intent.
Great, thank you.
So going back to alternative 1, the commissioner shall adopt rules related to the protection, conservation, and taking of reptiles and amphibians. They shall prohibit intentional taking. So the unintentional taking, motor vehicle, the construction project, etc., would not be prohibited, except for authorized takings for scientific, educational, or non-commercial, cultural, or ceremonial purposes. You're going to have the department itself, universities, other scientific researchers who want to collect reptiles or amphibians for study. There are some apparently ceremonial, non-commercial ceremonial uses of the animals. So that would be allowed under rule. Remember, this is all under rule. The rule would also prohibit the possession and importation of species of reptiles or amphibians that pose a threat to species and ecosystems in Vermont. So this is just prohibiting things that are at a high degree of harm or pose a risk of harm to Vermont. It's not related to commercial. It's just they pose a risk of harm. You know, for example, back in the day, they wouldn't let elephants in because elephants carry brucellosis, which can easily transfer to cows. And the elephant was going to be at a petting zoo. So, like, no, that's a high risk to Vermont animals. On page 1, line 14 and 15, the rules would also prohibit the collection or possession of specified reptiles and amphibians for commercial use, export, or sale. So those are the mandatory prohibitions that will have to be in rule. Then as part of the rules, the commissioner would have discretion to address possession limits, territorial limits, manner of taking, etc. I didn't include in that list seasons because I wasn't sure where you as a committee were on seasons, but I wanted to note it for you.
Wouldn't we have seasons in there?
I thought you didn't want to have. I think honestly, I think it's a good idea. And when you look at some of the commercial prohibitions in other states, they usually are time limited. So I think it's probably wise, but I wasn't sure where you were. So I can add seasons in if that's the alternative you ultimately select.
Well, if it has possession limits and manner of take, it seems like.
Yeah. Okay. Alternative 2.
Representative Austin.
Yes. Where it says specified reptiles, does the secretary determine what specified reptiles?
Yes,
Yes. Okay.
yes,
The commissioner,
the commissioner.
Commissioner, sorry.
Representative Bartholomew.
when it talks about non-commercial, cultural or ceremonial purposes, does that, can they take, endangered species using that clause
Um,
or threatened or
uh,
what are the limitations?
yes, you can get an incidental take permit to take a threatened or endangered species for non-commercial, cultural ceremony.
But you need a permit,
You need a permit.
but you could also be denied the permit.
Yes.
Representative Logan.
Thank you. So with both of these options, just to be clear, that subsection C of section 6 will, and D will still be there, and E, C, D, and E. Well, so this would just replace subsections A.
This replaces all of section 6.
Oh. So. Where were you just reading about non-ceremonial?
Up on-
That is on page 1, line 7.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Gotcha.
Of the alternatives. Okay. Okay.
Alternative 2.
Yes.
So this, as I previously said, starts out with a person shall not take a reptile or amphibian in the state unless authorized by rules adopted under subsection B. And it says a person shall not possess or import a species of reptile or amphibian that, as determined by the commissioner, poses a threat to species and ecosystems in Vermont, except that they shall allow possession of pets legally acquired. And then a person shall not collect or possess reptiles and amphibians specified by the commissioner by rule for commercial use, export, or sale. And then the commissioner may, by rule, allow the taking of a reptile or amphibian that's been classified as a common species, widespread and abundant, which is known as S5. That's how the department defines it on their website, with stable or increasing populations indicated by data collected by the department. Then the commissioner, under criteria adopted by rule, may allow a person to take, collect, or possess a specified reptile or amphibian for scientific, educational, or non-commercial, cultural, or ceremonial purposes. You don't see here the seasons, the territorial limits, the manner of means of taking. That can easily be added. But it's also the criteria by which the person may take. I mean, that falls underneath that too. But if you want to be specific about that, I think
Mhm.
you can be specific.
Under on line 18, the criteria there.
Yep. Now, one of the things that the department was indicating yesterday is that if you went with the prohibition on taking, there will be this time period between the enactment of the law and the adoption of the rules, and how that interplays with their existing authority under 4709 to allow for possession or import of animals. You can handle that with a scheduled, structured implementation timeline. You can have these prohibitions not go into effect until the rules are adopted. That makes it all clear what the scheme is going to be. And you don't have a period of uncertainty. What you do have is a potential incentive for people to go and collect or import before those rules go into place, before these statutes and rules go into place. But you deal with that. That's kind of it's a bridge you often cross, and you have to decide whether or not you're willing to take that risk in order to provide kind of regulatory predictability and transparency into what is going to be the law.
And doesn't that also, though, make the difference between A or 1 and 2? Gets rid of the difference, kind of.
Yeah, well, you could do the same thing with 1. You can push those rules out, but the rules have to be by a certain date, and up until then, yeah, you're still gonna have that incentive.
It does seem like either way, we want the rules by a certain date,
Yeah.
whichever alternative. Representative Chapin.
Well, if we're gonna make that timeline, if we're gonna go with alternative 2 and we want that kind of timeline, then I guess also the rules should be shall, not may. Because otherwise we may never get to a,
Where would you,
I guess I'm just acknowledging that in alternative 2, right, the rules are the commissioner may.
right,
Commissioner could also may not, but we want those prohibitions above to go into effect at some point. Either way, whether they do or don't make the rules.
Yeah, good point.
So we could put it off a year and they have a year to make the rules or not. But either way, the prohibitions would go into effect in a year.
Mhm.
so do you want that changed?
Sorry, which change?
The may?
Well, I want to hear from folks on alternative 1 or 2 first. Representative Norris.
I like alternative 2 with I think leaving it at May, but giving them a year. And after a year, everything's prohibited unless they come through with rules that allow. That's,
Sounds
yeah,
good to me.
2 just seems a little clearer.
2 seems clearer to me too. Representative Safowitz.
Michael, in alternative 2, we say a person shall not take, and there's no exceptions there. It's not intentional or not. We need to fix that.
You could add a knowing requirement or intentional requirement. The person shall not intentionally take a reptile or amphibian.
Representative Pritchard.
So I guess part of my concern and wasn't my intent, but I think part of the reason I think this thing got screwed up. I got thinking about when we talked about the hitting the, the snake with the lawnmower and stuff like that. Certainly that was not the intent. It was not the intent to have a teacher in their classroom go out and get a salamander and a tree frog for the terrarium and be criminals. So that part, I want to make sure that's corrected. And I guess is it also now back to the commissioner to make the decisions on take, is that decision falls on he or she to do that, how it originally was, correct?
Yes, and honestly, I think what you're gonna see, as I stated earlier, there's exceptions for the prohibition on taking an endangered or threatened species, and they're very similar to what's being allowed here, the scientific, educational, ceremonial. What the commissioner could do is set forth effectively a general permit for taking any S5. And then establish specific criteria for certain types of S5. But for anything else that's not S5, it's going to have to be something that she's likely going to have to individually authorize. Like if you want to take possession of an S5 for an educational, a non-S5, like an S3, for an educational research project, you're going to need an authorization from the commissioner to do that.
Okay. But if you put the word intentionally take, does that change that?
Well, let's talk about the word take. Is that you mean kill? Or do you mean more than that?
Take means take, right? Or does it not?
Take means pursue, harrow, worry, destroy habitat. It is much broader than just kill.
How does it affect the teacher and the kids?
It's down the bottom, I think, at the last one on two. Because they can use it for educational.
Both are the B, both B and B1 and B2.
Mine's 19 as well.
So there's probably going to be authorization for possession for educational purposes of S5 species.
Like,
It covers it. Representative Bartholomew.
When we use S5, does that in statute, do we have to define, will it be perpetually clear what that means?
There's not a great definition of it. So if you really want to be clear to define it, that'd be worthwhile,
They
but there's
define it in their,
not really. It changes.
to the casual reader, that will be meaningless.
So what you could be is that's what it is. It's an animal, reptile or amphibian that's been classified as common, widespread and abundant.
Known as S5. I think common, widespread, abundant is describing what S5 is.
Right. That's how they describe it
Yeah.
on their website. And there are tiers. Each series has its own description, and that's the description that they have for S5.
Any other questions? Representative Logan, Austin, and then Sadkowitz.
Yeah, just comparing the most recent draft to this alternative language for this section. I do feel like we're missing the intent language from subsection E, rules adopted by the commissioner under the section shall be designed to maintain the best health population and utilization levels of
Can you
the
tell us what page you're on the main bill?
8 lines 15 through 17 in draft 3.4.
Thank you. The B1 with the S5 references, trying to get at the same thing.
Typically, that language in D in draft number 3.4, that follows all the rules for taking. So it does make sense to have it.
Sorry, I didn't follow you. It's,
So in draft 3.4,
yep,
on sub D, that whenever there's an authorized taking or rules allowing an authorized taking, the commissioner is directed to design those rules to maintain the best health population and utilization levels.
so you're suggesting in our alternative 2, we should insert that?
Yeah, put it in as a new subsection. But all of the Fish and Wildlife Board rules for taking have to meet that standard. They're supposed to meet that standard.
Where would you suggest that
It's
goes?
just a new subsection at the very end.
Like a 3?
No, a new C.
Okay. Representative Austin.
On, to, the one, I'm just wondering, does this committee get a report on every year about whether something's gone from a S5 to an S3 or an S1? Do we get?
I don't, I'm not aware of that, no.
Another thing I wanted to ask you is, do you want these draft rules to come back to you before they go to LCAR?
Not sure I do. Does anyone else feel strongly about that? Yeah. Is there a reason that you're asking that question?
It just, if you have them give you a draft, say next January, then you can react to them legislatively before it gets into the LCAR process where you can only object. I'm a little sensitive after the trapping rules. So that's why I'm offering.
Okay. Can you remind us what happened with the traffic rules? I'm not sure we'll go there, but.
So you require the department to adopt new best management practices for trapping. You have those best management practices, the draft submitted to you. You made recommendations. It went to the board rejected some of the provisions in the department's proposed best management practices. And then it went to LCAR, and LCAR objected because the rules were not consistent with intent of the legislature. And the board went forward over LCAR's objections.
Mhm.
And there's, I believe, still ongoing litigation related.
Yeah, I don't think this will be as contentious as trapping.
And how would it, I'm not sure how including the draft back to us, I'm not clear how it helps. It didn't help in that case, right?
Well, but it clarified legislative intent very much for LCAR. Yeah. Did you have a question?
Oh, I just, my other just thought was that we could strike the phrase known as S5 ranked species. It doesn't seem to add anything if it means the same thing as common, widespread, and abundant. It makes things simpler, more consistent over time, perhaps.
Some members asked for that, so I wanted to hear from them on that thought. Was that you, Representative Pritchard? Did
Well, it
you?
defines the classification. If you don't have that in there, I think it's kind of ambiguous. I mean, what defines it?
I mean, Representative Bartholomew indicated maybe we should have a definition, or you should have a definition. I can do that. And I'll try to be as consistent with the department as possible.
My concern with that is that it is an internal thing that they use to determine, and it may change. And I don't want us to get wound around the axle that they use it now. And I don't know that I'm not sure there's a need for us to meddle with it. I don't know how often they change it or update it. Representative Bartholomew.
And you just said that they define it as common, widespread and abundant.
Yeah.
So
Right.
you'd be defining something that's already said right here.
But when you look at their tiers, they just have S5.
Yeah.
And there's a list.
Of the species.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
I mean, I think this does a good job of splitting the difference and being clear and covering both. Representative Chapin.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've worked with the Natural Heritage Program, and I think that since this is not in statute how the ranks are set, but it's in their internal policies and procedures, I'd rather just be really clear by both saying how it's currently defined and how it's currently referred to. So I agree.
All right. Their thoughts. Representative Morris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just curious, yesterday, this seemed a whole lot clearer to me when Hannah was speaking for the department. Are either of these options their preference?
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
Representative Chapin.
Just on that, I recommended we go back to similar language to what they originally proposed to us, because what we were looking at when Hannah was in the room yesterday was a wildly different version that Michael had drafted in order to get at some of our concerns. And so yesterday afternoon, after we met, I suggested something along these lines to really go back to their language, very similar, and really tweak it relatively little, because that was their language. And so that's sort of how we ended up here. But we haven't heard from them, I think, for one of these. We just heard yesterday that where it went yesterday did not
Right.
seem like a good idea to them.
Representative Bartholomew.
When the draft we were looking at before had listed 3 species, does this replace that section, or is that still somewhere else in other part of
It
the?
replaces it.
Okay,
There was concern about listing species and
right, that was a concern I had, but I didn't know whether it was part of this or whether it's somewhere else.
no, this replaces what the language from yesterday is section 6. This would replace section 6 with the changes you just requested, like Representative Logan asking for the new sub C about.
And there was some new text yesterday about specifically dealing with the invasive pond slider. Is that?
Well, that's section
That's somewhere
7.
else. Yeah,
That's
not.
section 7,
Okay. That's not gone yet.
not
Okay.
yet.
Okay.
We're not proposing to delete it.
No, I didn't. It was new text yesterday, and I was wondering if that was still under consideration.
All right, so that's section 7.
But yeah, did you have something else on where we were before we move on?
No, I can wait. You can go on to say.
So the concern with the language yesterday is that it would take time for implementation, and therefore you just wanted to immediately ban the import or possession of a pond slider turtle unless the turtle was legally acquired as a pet prior to July 1, 2025. And that's what it does. And that it would then be repealed on the effective date that the rule was adopted by the commissioner. So pond sliders would the trade in them, the possession of them would stop. I did have a question about whether or not you wanted to ban the sale of them during that kind of period.
Oh, before July 1, 2025.
Right.
And does sub C though refers to, I'm on now on page 9 of draft 3.4. When a hunting license issued,
Well, that's the endorsement language that,
I know, but is it still referring to the right thing? 10 BSA Part 4?
Yes.
Taking the, okay. Okay. So you just asked the question, do we want to ban the sale of them before July 1, 2025?
I think it will be depending on when you want the rulemaking date for alternative 2. And you haven't told me that yet.
When we want the rules made by.
Yeah.
I mean, I would probably give them, I'd be fairly generous, a year and a half.
So January of 27. And then this language would be, well, this language probably would still be July 1, 2025.
Yeah. Which is the way they had it.
Right.
Representative North.
So if I could just help me understand your response to Representative Morris's question when he asked, does Fish and Wildlife have a preference over each one of these? And you said no. Does that mean they don't prefer either of these, or they're okay with either?
So remember, they wanted discretionary rulemaking. They didn't want a statutory ban or a statutory mandate for rulemaking. So that's right. Both of these would not comport with what they wanted. Because one would have the statutory ban, which they don't want. And the other would have the mandatory rulemaking, which they also don't want. They also wanted to focus on commercial import and possession and sale. And this goes beyond that. And so both of them go beyond that. And so I still think the department's going to have concern.
I'm not sure that concern. We're asked to choose between the two alternatives, but if they don't like either, then I've got concern with picking either. It's their bill, or their actual input to create a bill. Something that they don't want.
Representative Sakowicz.
Yeah, one, going back to that part of the bill, section 6, I would say that we're still giving the commissioner a lot of discretion in terms of what she's allowed to do. So even though we're changing the sort of the default, we're really giving the department a really wide latitude in terms of, what they're going to allow in terms of the taking of these creatures. So, I mean, we haven't heard from them, but it seems like we're operating more within the spirit of what they would like to see, is my understanding. And then I was also just wondering, when we got into section 7, the question about sale of pond sliders, is there any reason why we wouldn't just say a person shall not import, possess, or sell? And then that would just make it really clear that you can't do that.
I don't know if these are in pet stores. Are they?
No,
I don't know.
Does it matter? I mean, what do you mean you don't know if they're in pet stores? Where else would they be?
I personally am unaware of how they're sold or how I don't know.
But there's no reason not to say sale.
Yeah, so awesome.
Representative Bartholomew.
If I'm looking at the right language from yesterday for section 7, there's nothing in here that allows the taking of a pond slider. Was the previous section 6 would make, you can't take a pond slider either? Or am I just not reading this correctly? Because it seems like if we've already identified that these are a problem and could be breeding, not yet, but maybe they are, we don't know. Be better to get them now, later. So shouldn't we make an exception for taking an invasive turtle we know is a problem or could become a problem?
Leave it up to the commissioner to write the rule around it.
So are you saying that a person shall not import, possess, or sell in the state of pond slider, turtle, unless the turtle was legally required as a pet prior to July 125, or in order to remove it from the wild?
Well, it just, this one section is just saying you're not taking reptiles and amphibians until there's a rule defining what. you
Well,
can
it doesn't
take
say
and when.
take here. It says shall not import,
I know, I'm
possess.
talking about the part, section
Right.
6.
Right.
So then that would include pond sliders, that you can't take them until a rule. But if we know that they're invasive and don't want them here, why would we allow them? Why wouldn't we allow people to get rid of them now before they're a problem? Should there be an exception in the section 6 for pond sliders?
There's non-native species in
Yeah,
general.
non-native invasive species.
So,
Yeah, to Jacob.
I was just looking at West Virginia, who, did something very similar in 2021. Which is around native reptiles and amphibians. I don't love going with native because in 50 years, we're gonna see a lot of migration and due to climate change, and so,
Or now, the pond slider.
right, so I guess I just, maybe it's more the invasive piece, but so I sort of like, I don't know, I'm not sure how to deal with that, but I agree that we don't want to stop people from taking an invasive, what we right now know is an invasive species. But I just wanted to mention, just overall, in looking at West Virginia's, I can share this link. I think it's just really interesting to see like how they're sharing a new law prohibiting possession of most native reptiles, amphibians, and to take or possess. It just very similar to what we're working on right now, and I'm happy to share that link. It's just helpful to see other states that are doing something.
Sure.
We just did something really similar.
Yeah.
And I just want to reiterate, I really want to respect the department's intentions behind this, but I also think in addition to sort of just trying not to disturb what they brought to us as language very much, but that really from within the department and outside the department, we've heard very clearly like virtually unanimous agreement that reptiles and amphibians are really delicate species that are overall generally threatened and endangered, and we don't understand their populations very well, and I know they're changing a lot. And so I think the only thing we're really doing here that's different from what they brought us is saying we are going to have a prohibition, and here's a rulemaking period, and giving really significant discretion over that. So I guess I do want to move forward in this pathway. It's personally important to me. I came into this conversation being like, what? Like, we have no rules and regulations around the conservation of reptiles and amphibians. Like, I was just shocked as an ecologist and somebody who has lived in this state my entire life that isn't already here. So I guess I really think we're trying to do this in a delicate and respectful way of the department, but I do think everybody really wants the same outcome in the end.
Representative Bartholomew.
Just as way of explanation, if you've ever been scuba diving in the Caribbean and seen the proliferation of invasive lionfish, you'd understand my gut reaction to the testimony we heard on the pond slider.
Yeah, I have
Everywhere.
had that experience too.
So it's kind of like, stop them now. That's what you're seeing in me.
Representative Tagliavia, then Logan.
If you really want to deal with the pond slider, put a bounty on them.
But for now,
Oh,
they're,
kids,
now you
what?
can- now you can buy them, and then if the bounty's higher than what you can.
No, you can put a condition on it.
Industry.
Put a condition on it. But the thing is, you wanna make sure that people know what they're identifying, otherwise you're gonna wind up with other species.
Yeah.
Getting turned in
That was
accidentally.
That's
That's the big thing.
Representative Logan.
So we want to clarify, if we're going with alternative two, we want to clarify B1 and add invasive species in addition to common, widespread, and abundant species. Is that what we're trying to say here?
Or you can do what West Virginia did and just said a person shall not intentionally take a native reptile or amphibian. And other states do that too.
Yeah.
Made sense 30 years ago, but
Yeah, I don't wanna. Yeah.
Because right now, we're prohibiting taking all reptiles or amphibians except for when rules are made. And then when rules are made, the only ones that'll be allowed to be taken are common, widespread, and abundant. But let's say the red pond slider wasn't an S5 ranked species.
Wouldn't be at this point.
I can build back into the rulemaking, the ability for the commissioner to adopt rule allowing taking when they pose a threat.
Yeah, that's missing. I
Yeah.
was wondering about
Yeah.
that too.
I would address that issue.
Yeah.
But yeah,
So just add that to B1, add that concept of invasive or add that to B1.
Yes, it would be under, probably be a new subdivision, like a B2 or a new B2 or a B3.
and did you share this language with Hannah Smith?
No.
Oh, good. Yeah, we're gonna need to do that.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
Other thoughts on this?
I mean,
Senator Boston?
yeah, I'm just confused because you worked yesterday afternoon, right, to come to this agreement and
A couple of us did.
with, the agent.
No,
No, oh,
three
okay.
of us sat down with Michael. We did not.
Gotcha. Okay, that's coming from the agent. Okay, that clears it up for me.
I can't tell what you're pointing at.
Chris.
Oh, he's always backed himself right behind. Yeah, I can't see him. Representative Pritchard.
I think you know, at this point, I still like fishing, so I'd like to come back. I think,
Yep, I just said that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
They're all gone this week anyway. Except Hannah. I mean, they're at a conference. That's why they're not here, in case anyone's wondering. But I also noticed, Jamie, that you're here and this is a bill of interest to you. And did you have any thoughts?
I don't, I'm just interested in the bill and support it, and so appreciate the work you're doing on it.
so I will have a new version of it.
Apparently, yes.
Do you want anything else to change?
Hope not. That was a lot.
Can you just go over what you're changing?
Excuse me?
And go over what you're changing?
Replacing section 6 in the draft yesterday with alternative 2. In alternative 2, you want to clarify on page 2, line 4, that a person shall not intentionally take a reptile or amphibian. The import and possession language largely stays the same. So does the collection or possession language on lines 12 and 13. You want to build into the rulemaking the ability of the commissioner to authorize the taking of a reptile or amphibian when it poses a threat to health and safety or ecosystems. And it would be any reptile, not native, if not invasive or just native, any. You want a timeline for adoption of the rule of January 1st of 2027. You want the language that Representative Logan noted that's in section 6 in the draft from yesterday. That's not in this, requiring that the rules be designed to maintain the best health, population, and utilization levels of the regulated reptile or amphibian. And then in section 7, on the prohibition on the import and possession of slider, you want that to apply to sale as well.
That's what I have.
And you said just before that, before sale, yes.
The utilization level
Yeah.
It's in version 3.4.
on page 8, line 4 of 3.4, which you received yesterday. Might be working off a different.
Just trying to find what you were. Thank you.
Anything else?
That's it. Thank you. Then we have 86.
Are you ready?
Yes.
For draft, for H86, you should have draft 5.3 in front of you with a 4/22 date and a 7:45 PM timestamp. There's no highlighting in this because hopefully there will be no need for further changes. But I can point out to you where changes were made. And specifically, they were in the language regarding liability protection and the records kept for liability protection. You can see that on page 7. There have been, I can't remember who noted that the training is not just for winter de-icing, it's for application for dust suppression. And so on page 7, line 15, there was a requirement to keep a record describing its winter road. It's just describing its road, parking lot, and property maintenance practices consistent with the requirements determined by the secretary. And then in that next sentence where it says the record shall include the type and rate of application of salt or salt alternatives used, it had previously said de-icing materials. And so de-icing was replaced with salt or salt alternatives. And these same changes were made underneath the municipal salt applicator record keeping requirement, which is on page 10 going on to page 11. The same striking of the winter and the same striking of de-icing and replacing with salt or salt alternatives. In addition, to clarify that the Vermont Local Roads curriculum is voluntary, just as the commercial salt applicator certification is voluntary. On page 9, line 14, the word voluntary was inserted before Vermont Local Roads curriculum. And those were the changes.
Okay. We had an additional request from A&R to focus the report on salt sheds on municipal and not include commercial. And so that would be, as far as I can tell, maybe the bottom of page 8, line 20. The inventory of facilities in the state used for storage of salt.
Well, right now it's all three, state, municipal, and private.
Privately owned, I see it above. I think they think that privately owned is beyond, spans the scope, beyond their ability or interest.
And what about state?
I think state are much easier for them to inventory. They hopefully know where they are. So if we need, do we need to qualify on line 20? An inventory of facilities in the state? To
You
be
could say an inventory of state,
publicly owned.
state or municipal.
On page 8, are we just striking those 3 words and privately owned?
Yes.
Line 17.
And do we need to do it any of the others? If we've already qualified it on, by striking it on 18 and made clear on line 20?
So why don't I do this? So where it first says state and municipal facilities, I'm just gonna put a parentheses that says facilities.
Right.
Then whenever facilities is thereafter used, it will be referring to state and municipal.
Perfect. Okay. Questions? Further changes? Ready for a vote?
I do have a question.
Yes.
Chair, thank you. Are we gonna get the transportation committee to review this?
I have talked to the chair of the transportation committee. And so he's aware of it. And I don't know if he brought it to his committee or not, but he's okay with it the way it is.
He's okay with it the way it is?
In the conversation I had with him, he was hoping to have a walkthrough real quick. Not more than an hour ago.
Yeah.
Even if they take a drive-by, he would like to have a look.
Right. He can't do it till Friday is the problem. And it, like, we've been perseverating for a while on this bill.
My preference is to have him look at it, even if we wait till next week to vote.
Full voting without having a look at it.
Just in terms of process, given that conversation, won't this next go to a money committee? So wouldn't there still be time for transportation to drive by?
It may go to both,
Both money committees.
yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Transportation is money.
But it's not their money.
No, it's not.
Not their money bill.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just meaning it's not going on the floor, so there is
Yeah.
more time for them to.
Okay. I guess I'm just thinking about like the majority, yes, they will have time, and I mean, the majority of the bill is focused on private property with private applicators.
And AOT is explicitly excluded
Yeah,
and transportation infrastructure projects are explicitly excluded.
right. Which is why when I talked to him 10 days or 2 weeks ago, he didn't need to walk through it. And when I talked to him a few minutes ago after the floor, he said if he was also interested in striking the private facilities, although again, that's not his area of jurisdiction. But so
Does their area of jurisdiction include municipal?
Roads.
and they'll have time. I think that we're sort of starting to bump up against the clock here on bills, so if folks who have an interest in them walking through it can be satisfied by them doing that while it's on its way, they will have time to amend it if they so choose.
I'm just gonna ask that, Madam Chair. Just gonna ask that question about procedurally. I thought we as a committee voted on it and then it got forwarded to them, or do we have them do a look through first and then we vote?
Well, I mean, it's, if there were concerns, I would have hoped they would have brought them to us because we've been talking to them for a while about the bill. And if there were, I guess we would probably prefer to hold it and have them amend it, but in this instance, I guess I would say it's probably prudent to get it on its way because it needs to go to other committees. Other thoughts on that? Good. All right.
I guess I was gonna say that I would prefer a nice vote out of this committee if it means waiting a day than not having also vote as you can on the committee.
We're gonna vote. I mean, is this changing people's votes? Whether or not we hold it up or move it? And Ella's willing to report it?
Sure. Somebody else is really excited to report, so.
All right, is there a motion
So moved.
The changes that.
with the changes to remove privately owned salt sheds from the inventory?
Yes. Second,
You probably need to get
I have them.
you have it, great.
And so is this I just want to clarify that this is the draft 5/3, 4/22/25 at 7:45.
I'm gonna change the date and timestamp, but I'll leave it at 5.3.
I have to put the draft. Yeah, okay, yeah.
Because it's really just technical.
All right, is there further, motion's been made and seconded to approve draft 5.3 with the change we've discussed. Is there any further discussion?
One question.
Yes.
The changes we discussed are the municipal shed inventory for commercial
Mhm. Removing
removing
commercial.
it.
Yep.
and municipalities.
Now municipalities, they're gonna inventory state and municipal storage. And we're gonna define that as facilities, so you don't have to say state and municipal in front of facilities each time. And any reference to privately owned will be removed or commercially owned. There's only one reference.
I guess I hang up on municipal expenses. And they got a lot of towns that do not have salt sheds.
This is just inventorying
This
the
is,
state of their
this is-
current salt shed.
this is identifying where the storage is. Identifying which are within 100 yards and which are not within 100 yards of the water. And then identifying the funding that would be necessary to cover or move that. No mandate, just a report on what and how much it would cost.
Presumably where they're located. Within 100 yards of. Great. Further discussion? Not seeing any. Clerk shall commence to call the roll.
Okay. Dana Austin, yes. John Bartholomew,
Yes.
Ella Chase. Yes. Larry Maber. Kate Logan,
Yes.
Christie Morris.
Yes.
Rob North,
No.
Chris Pritchard,
No.
Larry Sackler,
Yes.
Mike Papavia,
No.
and Amy Shaw.
Yes.
So 7-4.
Right, we will. I'd ask if you could, are you set with this one on 86?
Yes.
Okay, so on 230, I would ask that you, send Hannah the draft language after we make the changes.
Okay.
Please. Okay, maybe we'll try to have you back in tomorrow morning if you're available. Any further discussion this afternoon, members? All right. With that, we're adjourned for the afternoon.